Welcome to this week's episode of Grooves of Influence. My name's Xavier, your host, and this week I'm joined by guest artist Steve. Steve, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Could you introduce yourself and let everybody know a little bit about you, what type of music you make, and where
Sure.
you're from?
Yeah. So my full name is Stephen Borth II. I was born in Sacramento, California. And I've lived in Copenhagen, Denmark, actually, for the past 14 years now, I believe. Yeah, 14 years. So that's been an interesting kind of change at this point in my life, living in a completely different continent and kind of relearning a lot of social cues and all these things with a different culture and learning a new language or attempting to learn a new language. Um, I've been playing music for all my life, pretty much. I started playing saxophone when I was in fourth grade. So yeah, a long time. And then I started off doing music professionally via the kind of ska-punk scene that happened in the late 90s. There was played with a few bands, Link 80 and RX Bandits, and that kind of led me onto the path where I am now, where I was able to experience the world by touring and sleeping on floors and sleeping in hotels and touring like 9 months out of the year and meeting friends around the world and kind of the realization that we are just one people. Had these amazing kind of aha moments, learning just about how music can connect people and how important music is as a communication and a language. And yeah, no, I basically feel very privileged to have those experiences, and they changed the way I look at life. And I wouldn't be living in Copenhagen if I didn't have that. Kind of the beginning of my path was from this kind of going out into the world and just meeting new people every day and just communicating through music and yeah, I think that for me has been the biggest reward in life, is knowing that we're all just people and getting rid of any or not any, but like kind of eliminating a lot of potential like assumptions about people or like just kind of when you meet someone, just you're starting at zero and like assuming that they are the same as me at some level, like we're basically there's this human level that is realized when you travel so much and are meeting new cultures every day. And so, but yeah, I would say that's something that I'm most thankful for in life,
That's
is being
awesome.
able to have that opportunity.
Yeah, I imagine that was a whirlwind of a journey and still continues to be as you're still in music, still doing a ton.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Um,
But yeah,
but
I guess I didn't even like you asked like kind of what music that was just the beginning. So like ska punk, and then like through ska punk, I started touring in England a lot, and then I got in really into Jamaican music. And so I started to tour in England, and then we would go before the or right after the sound check, because you only had like an hour because the shops closed early. So we go to the record stores and go shopping and get all these Trojan records compilation. And then I got into rocksteady and dub, and then from there it kind of just uh, blossomed into like me just loving Jamaican music and jazz uh, and just kind of that slowly infiltrating what how I communicate, and because now a lot of the projects that I do have dub as the kind of foundation of it, no matter what style. So that experience for me in England and how it kind of took me down this other path really was important as well.
yeah, that's an interesting to see dub throughout all your music. I mean, just because you do, jazz, R&B, you have all these different projects you're working on, and it's kind of cool to see how that's all flowed together. And every time I have a conversation like this, I always start with a question. What is that most influential album to you?
Right. So I guess the album is not a dub album, but there's a greater significance because when I was playing in a band called RX Bandits, and they were based in uh, Seal Beach, Long Beach area. and I was living in Sacramento Bay Area region in that time. So if we would rehearse, I would go down, drive down, and we would rehearse for like maybe a week or two before the tour started. So sometimes I would drive alone, and so I had this like little Honda Civic going down the I-5 for 7 hours, and then I had this copy of Stevie Wonder Talking Book, and that album just really spoke to me in so many different ways, and like listening to it alone, you know, on you know with cars flying by, and then I started to sing along with it, and I realized, oh, this is kind of, it's fun to sing. And uh I was, my father was a musician, so I'd been around singing all my life, but I'd always, like, I guess as a child, you always think what your parents are doing is, oh, maybe I don't want to do that because that's, what they do. And so I never really tried it much. Uh, and so being able to kind of learn the songs on Talking Book, and like being able to kind of experience it through hearing Stevie sing, but also through my own voice, and like trying to find yeah, basically kind of finding my voice through the album. And then also kind of the realization that how you could have a pop record, but it could actually be super complicated, but it could also not sound very complicated because of the presentation and the way that um uh he forms everything to make it so it's accessible. So he made like super complicated kind of jazz music accessible, which is also like trickery. It's magic, like learning more about music later in life. It's like, wow, because if you sit down and you try to play along to those records, it's like you realize it's like, okay, this is actually very complicated structure, and also um it weaves and does all these things, but you're not even thinking about that because you're like, oh, this is a nice melody, and this sounds good to me, and it's touching me, and it's touching my soul in a way that I feel something, and like I can connect with it automatically because there's something about it. And then later on I learned about the whole, that period of time where he actually recorded like 4 albums at once. I think it was 4, but and this whole synthesizer that he was built just for those sessions, and like how back then, uh, you know, he had this realization that he could make all these sounds by himself, whereas before he would have to hire like a horn section or a violins. And he's like, oh, I can actually just do it with this Moog synthesizer and play bass and make these like string arrangements, and just looking back now, or like looking back now and realizing how, what an important time that was in his career, and how fresh it must have felt for him to be like, okay, I have this new record contract with Motown. I kind of own, I know my worth. And and he was only like 21, which is crazy, like 21 years old at the time. And and to come up with these like this like flow, you could tell it's like, because for me, when I get a new instrument, the first few days is so important, because you're inspired and you're testing it. You're testing the boundaries of, okay, well, how can I make this sound like, oh, this is cool. If I do this, this works. And I can imagine with him, it was the same thing. And that's why he wrote 4 albums in like, I didn't know the full story, but I know it was in a very short period of time. He wrote many albums. And that's why it's so inspired, because he was finding a new way to work. And it was also very much something that he could do kind of by himself, and he didn't have to like wait for the session musicians to show up. He could just like be like, okay, I'm gonna lay down the drum track, okay, let's get that going. Okay, now I'll do the bass. So it's nice to kind of, as the years go on, know why I liked it so much, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's in and of itself. Besides, like, I mean, there's slow songs, there's complex songs. I mean, there's songs within the album that you're listening to and you're like, dude, I will get lost in these layers of sound. Like, he's got so many different little melodies going in so many different directions. It's amazing. But they all
Tastefully.
intertwine.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I know you're produced, and so like, what does it look like to really take those layers and make them intertwine, even though they're so separate? Like, they're still like, I feel like they're all running around doing their own thing. Um, but they still work together. How do
for,
you do that?
for sure, I think a lot of it is instinct. For me, like when I'm making a record, I kind of know instinctually what is going to be a sound that is stepping on another sound, or like for instance, when we do for the Mighty Tiny and the Mini Few album, which just came out, you know, me and my friend Lauritz, who did a lot of the horn arrangements, you know, we had to have the kind of all the vocals and everything done before we could do the horn, because we needed to know where the space was that we could work in. Do you know what I mean? So like when you're writing a song, you have to kind of think of all of the elements and how they can work with each other, and you always want them to be working with each other and not against each other, obviously, because then that's where there would be potential dissonance and make it so it's maybe not so relatable, or so, you know, because I think for me, what I've realized also in my work is that if I am ever like listening back to a track that I'm working on and something takes me out of the moment, that's when I need to rethink it and be like, oh wait, why did that element take me out of the moment? And that probably actually needs to go, because I was grooving and or whatever, you know, and then now I'm not in that space anymore. Okay, that's a problem. So I think that's maybe the answer to the question. It's like, um, if something is taking you out in the moment, then it doesn't belong, because that's what music is, a moment, and it's something that you should be able to jump into. And if you're in that space, that's when it's something that will uh potentially change your life. Like that moment, you know, that song, when you're deep inside of it, is when it will be something that you could access later because it became a moment, and then you can always kind of go back there if you want to, you know, that space.
As a musician, what type of moments are you trying to create for listeners, for yourself? Like, do you have this in mind in the process of creation?
Not really. For me, like when I'm creating, I'm trying to be as instinctual as possible and not think. And I think that that is has come later in my career, because I think maybe every musician goes through this period. It's like when you're creating something, you're thinking of, oh, will so and so like this, or you start thinking about people outside of yourself, and I think that that is potentially can be a mistake, because you know when you're creating, you should be creating for the moment and not for someone else. You know what I mean? You should just let it happen. And and I think for me, like uh when I'm doing music alone, it's super important to kind of get in this zone of like, okay, I know I had this idea. Okay, now once I had this idea, I can stack another idea on top of it, and then and the ideas keep on coming. And then also, for instance, for a project like I Am an Instrument, which is a fully improvisational group that I have with my friends, then it's more exciting for me, because then I'm getting informed by five other people using their instincts and us listening to each other. And then that's where the making the music in the on the spot and making something up like a song in front of an audience together, why it can be so fun is because we're all doing the same thing at once. We're like listening to each other, and then we're also trying to not step on each other's toes, but we're also trying to make uh yeah, but yeah, we're not really trying. That's the thing. It's like, you know, we're just playing, and then it just happens, and like as long as we're listening to each other, then something uh special can potentially happen, I think.
Has improvisation always been kind of a part of your repertoire? Because I
Definitely.
feel like, yeah,
Yeah.
when did
I
it
mean,
start?
so actually the first time that I started to kind of learn how to improvise was at church when I was really young. Um, I I played saxophone in the church band, and that was kind of the first time where I was playing in front of 1,000 people. You know what I mean? And then also they when I was playing with the band, I didn't have set parts, and so like I was literally learning how to improvise as a whatever, I can't remember how old I was, 16 or 17 years old on stage. And then that was when I realized, okay, I love improvising, and like I don't necessarily like to. I mean, I do like to have like horn parts and like have to follow them, but for me, complete freedom is be able to like listen to the musician and hear what's going on and try to add something to it without adding too much or trying to stick out. Just trying to add just the right amount to make it a part of the experience that's happening already. So yeah, so that's actually my first experience in music was improvising, I would say.
Interesting. So, I mean, I feel like a lot of people don't have that experience. Typically, it starts like with sheet music, and
Totally.
and it totally changes your thinking around music. Speaking of improvising, in this album, I feel like there's elements of just a jam session. I feel like there's pieces of this album that feel so relaxed, so loose, where it's like this feels like these guys are just like hanging out, playing music together. How do you create that on an album? I know you have the improvisation group that does that purely,
Yeah.
but on your other projects, like, have you incorporated that element?
Yeah. So actually, it's funny that you notice that because for the Mighty Tiny and the Mini Few, "Be the Good People" album, that was a collection of recordings over a period of a few years, where I would invite musicians down, and I had like a Google Calendar, and I'd book the studio we have here that I'm here, and I would just have musicians come in and like my friends and be like, okay, so Adam, who plays drums, can play from 9 to 6 on Tuesday. So then, okay, then I need to book another drummer to come in at 7, so we can have a small break, and then he can play from 7 to 11, and then like all the different members, and then we would come in, and then we would just uh, make songs up. So like the way that I work is I organize these sessions, and then it is somewhat improvised, but then we gather in the room together, uh, and then usually someone will start playing an idea, and then that idea will evolve, and it's not fully improvised because then we're taking it and editing it live and being like, okay, oh, what if we add this B part to that, and then we stop. Okay, let's try that. Boom, boom, and then once we have a form, excuse me, once we have a form, then that is what potentially turns into a song. Now there are some of the songs on the Mighty Tiny album that were that we didn't really have an A or B part, that where we looked or listened through all the tracks later and we're like, oh, this little section right here could actually be something. And then we would take that section and then we build on top of that and make a song out of it. And so that actually happened a few times from the album, where there's like little jam section that we turned into, like, kind of produced in post to make it
Hmm.
what it is now, and there was, there that's basically the formula, though, is like, I like to make an environment. We have a studio here that's, you know, we can play 24 hours a day, and I usually invite people down, and then we like make soup or something like that, and like, so we have this space where it's like, it's not your normal, you know, look at the clock, make sure we're out of here by this time, or else we're going to be charged. It's like I am a part of a collective, and we share a studio, and then we just like section it off on a calendar together, and then like, okay, I'm gonna book it for 5 days, guys. Is that cool with everybody? Cool. You know what I mean? And then I invite the musicians in, and then we have the space to just hang out, listen to records. So a lot of the songs from the Mighty Tiny album were stuff where we would hang out, be eating some food together, and then throw on a record, be like, oh, this is a sick song. And then we should do something in that vein. And then we go into the studio and then write something that ended up sounding totally different from our reference point, but it still was like an inspiration point. And a lot of those songs are definitely like from jam, like all the songs are from jams because they were all written here. I don't like, not allow, I don't, we don't have people write stuff before they come. Like the idea is like, we're going to come up, whoever's here at the time, we're going to make something cool together. And it's going to be something that we are all a part of, and that we all can say like, okay, this was our musical piece that we came up with. And whoever was kind of in the room, then that's how we um, credit it as.
Yeah, no, that's honestly, it makes a lot of sense with the way the album sounds, in the sense of like the free form. It's not free form, but it's very relaxed. It's very groovy. It's very natural sounding, where it doesn't feel overly structured. And I think I mean, in the process of how you guys created the album, it makes complete sense why it sounds the way it does. Um, in music, I mean, you've been around in the industry for a long time. Do you find this like collaborative approach common? Like, is it something like you're trying to cultivate even more and more, or like how have you learned to approach music in this way?
For me, I was doing music, so I started off touring and being in bands and like where I would learn the material from the band that I joined or whatever, and then we would play and then we would have these sessions. Um, but then I did my solo producer career challenger thing. So it was just kind of me. And then I was like, oh, I don't really like doing music alone as much as I do playing with other people. So then that's when I started to have these sessions with this project called Satori. And that's where I started this concept of doing it in this form where I would invite people in. And it was back when I had this Tascam 388 tape machine. And like I would find a spot for us to set up in someone's garage or in some space, and like I would invite the musicians there, and then we'd turn that area into a studio and plug all our instruments into the Tascam 388, and then do the exact same thing that I'm doing now. So I've actually been doing this for like 20 years now. Like where it's just the way that I like to do sessions, where it's like I want to invite people in, make sure that they feel comfortable, and I want to make sure that there's an environment that there is respect and that there is everyone feels like they're a part of it. And I think for me, that's what makes it a fun experience for everybody. It's like, okay, if you're creating an environment where people feel respected and they feel like they're a part of something that could potentially turn into something else, then I think that that's cultivates some sort of positive energy. So like you can, if you feel a part of something, then you're going to want to give your best, and like, and if you feel comfortable, then you're going to be able to excel, because I know that the people that I invite in for sessions, like I did it very purposefully because I kind of saw them in the way they work, and I knew that they could handle it. And so uh it's very conscious, who I invite to the studio. So then I also know that, when they come in, they'll be able to do the job that I want, you know, they'll be able to help me achieve the goal that I wanted to. And so, I think that's, yeah, the most important for me is that people have a good time, and that they feel respected. And like, I've had multiple people come up to me after the sessions that, people that have been on this strict, regiment of how they usually play in bands, or, they play for a bigger artist and they're kind of just a studio guy or a live guy. And, I've multiple times people come up and be like, hey man, thank you so much for inviting me to the session. It's been so awesome to feel like free, and to be able to feel like I can give my input, and, to be a part of something that is fresh and not so regimented, and like that just makes, and every time someone comes up and says that to me, and then I'm like, okay, that it was what I wanted. I was successful because I made them feel like they were at home in my space, and that, I think that that comes across hopefully on the record too, that people are comfortable, and they're like, obviously all the people that I picked are incredibly talented, and so, you know it's just a blessing to be able to have these people, and then also having them feel secure and like not being, you know treated badly or anything. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
a healthy environment I try to create.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pretension in the world of music. I think it's intimidating, definitely for people who are younger in the world of music. Like, it's not always the most open, and it's really cool how you thoughtfully create a space where free form and creativity can flourish, right? It's
Totally.
not just laziness in the sense of we're just going to get together and play something. You're very thoughtful, which is such a cool combination. And I think that's why you created the piece of art you guys did with all the projects you've been a part of. I kind of dug into several of them, and they're all very
Love it.
unique. They sound very organic, right? Very natural but authentic all at the same time, which is, I feel like, that's true music, right? That's what we're trying to capture, truly the sound of emotion, right?
Exactly,
And
for sure.
that's just really cool.
Appreciate it.
And yeah, yeah, and just kind of switching gears a little bit. I'm intrigued by your story a little bit because like you've mentioned a couple groups you've been a part of and like the music you've been a part of, but like how has that progressed? Like how did you start with punk and ska and end up in improvisation jazz? Like what was that pathway like for you?
Okay. So my first job actually was at this dry cleaners in Sacramento, like in the suburbs of Sacramento. And I was working there, and then there was this kind of metal guy named Tom, who was a drummer for this like local metal band. And then one of these days he's like, you play saxophone, right? I was like, yeah. Oh, my buddy has this band called Lestistics, and they need they want a horn section. And this is like 96, 1996 or something around that time. So it was like right when the ska, like third wave ska, was kind of flourishing, and so all these bands were popping up all over the world, and and so I got in contact with his friend, and then I went to this storage unit like in Sacramento. They used to have bands that practice in these like public storage units, and then uh they could play till whatever time o'clock, like midnight or whatever. And then so I joined this band, and it was like this really fast, like kind of Voodoo Glow Skulls esque kind of like uh punk mixed with ska. And so like, but I was the only horn player, and so uh I went into the studio with him, and like I just made up the parts that I thought fit with the song, and then that kind of led me down the path of, I was in that band for a few years, and then one of the friends that I met at the storage unit played in another band, and then she met someone from Link 80, this band who was kind of already established um, in the kind of international scene on this label called Asian Men Records. And they were like, oh, this guy, they need a saxophone player. And so I said I would, go and try out with them in Oakland. And so I drove down to Oakland, tried out for them. And then literally, I think a month later, I was on my first international tour. And this is like 98. And my first tour was 6 months long. And we had like 2 weeks off, I think, in that time period. And we did like Canada twice, Europe, US 3 times, like in this. And we were just in this van, driving around and sleeping on people's floors and putting like signs up, after the show saying like, oh, we need a place to stay. And this goes back to that experience I was talking about earlier of like, I wouldn't change that for the world, like having that experience of like just kind of living off the music, and so from that, then I played in that band for 4 years, traveling around the world. And then my friend Steve Choi, who I met through the whole Asian Man Records crew, joined this band called RX Bandits. And then he was like, "Oh, we need a saxophone player." And like I'd been listening to, they had an album called Progress that came out in 2001, and I'd been listening to that, and I was like, "This is definitely the direction that I see myself going at this." It's this evolving of the sound, and like it's ska punk ish, but it also has these other elements uh like the Police and some dub and some a little bit of prog rock and all these weird things coming together, but they're all like killer musicians. And then so I was like, okay, this could be interesting. So I quit Link 80, and then I joined RX Bandits, and they were based down in Southern California. And then from there, we kept on touring. And so like I'd already been in the mix of touring like almost constantly. And so I just kind of kept on doing it. And then with RX Bandits, they had the kind of infrastructure that was already, moving a lot at a quicker rate than Link 80, because it was the music was more accessible, and it was also, it was just the production was on point, and like I kind of came into this thing that was already moving, and then we were playing like Warp Tour, and like all these dreams that I had as a kid were kind of coming true with me playing in this band and like playing in front of 1,000 people, 2,000 people a night, and like it was, and the fans were like really into the band. And like I never had this like constant flow of like, okay, when we show up at a show, it's going to be an amazing event, because we all started to play really well together, and it was this kind of like thing where we toured so much, and everyone was on such a high level of musicality that we were able to kind of start to finish each other's sentences musically on stage and have this experience of like this out of body experiences where the crowd is like going crazy and singing along to all the lyrics, and we're all just kind of knowing what each other are going to do. It was like so awesome, and I loved having that experience, you know, and that was just next level for me to be able to, you know, work with people that were on a level up than myself, so I could kind of rise to the occasion and show up in that way. And from that I learned so much because, you know, some of the guys in the band were into home production, and I was, oh, I can get a home studio now. And like, you know, we made enough money to like, I come back on tour and I could buy like a Pro Tool setup and like a laptop, and now I can like learn how to produce my own music. And then from that I was able to like, that's how all these other projects started to stem from. It's like I learned how to do music production and engineering and kind of DIY. Like, okay, what, I don't have to wait for other people to create music. I can do it like in my living room and have fun with it and just be creative and see whatever happens, you know? And so that's kind of something that spawned, that's why I'm here in the studio now. It's because I, you know, learned the basics of, you know, recording and yeah, and learning how to, you know, express my emotions via the music. And, you know, yeah. So I would definitely say that that was the path of where I am today, like coming from, that's why it was kind of ska-punk to this band that was from that world, but doing something else. But then I got into like the Jamaican music. And then through the people that I met here in Copenhagen, like Morton McCoy, who um, I played with, I think first when he was 16 years old, when I came over in 2008. He was a part of that Satori project, where I would travel around the world and like have people learn my songs, and then I show up and then we'd play. And then he became a crucial role of my connections um in the Copenhagen scene. Like we're in a few bands together. You know, we have the Guiding Star Orchestra, which is a roots, like instrumental roots reggae, uh very dubby band. And then also I'm an instrument. We're in that together as well. So I would definitely say it's also the people that I've worked with have kind of uh, helped, or like kind of, I'm on that path of music because I met these people who I had a common bond with like Jamaican music. And then from there, these other opportunities arose.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's a journey, man. Always love hearing those stories of how you ended up in Copenhagen. I was like,
Yeah,
Copenhagen, that's a little different.
for sure.
Is the jazz scene pretty big there? I'm not too familiar.
Yeah, so there's a lot of amazingly talented people here. It's wild to me because there's something about Denmark and precision, you know, like when there's the artists here, when they get into something, they deep dive, you know. And I know that happens around the world, but I think I've just noticed that there's, you know, the musicality in the scene here is at a high level, you know. And like that's why I feel so honored to be a part of it too, you know, because I see that, you know, there is the potential for a lot of the music that is in in Copenhagen to be internationally known, you know. And I think that that's actually happening now. There's a lot of attention that's coming to Copenhagen at the moment, and I'm excited to kind of see where that leads. But yeah, there are definitely, and like so many amazing musicians here that are easy to work with and like down to earth, but also incredibly talented. And I think that's just a great combination if you're part of a community, to be working with people that are humble, but also have, you know, honed their craft so tightly that they can do amazing things musically. So, but yeah, definitely there are definitely a lot of musicians here that are great and really nice to play with too. And like that's why on the Mighty Tiny album, there's actually quite a few from a lot of different groups that are on the project because of the connections that I made. And it's a very small town, so you know it's it's easy to meet a lot of people pretty quickly if you just, you know how it happens in a small town. It's like, you know, everyone, if you hear, oh, that guy is good at this, oh, then hey, can I have his number? You know what I mean? Like, and then it just happens kind of like that.
Yeah, word's gonna get around.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
awesome. And speaking of the great music coming out of Copenhagen, I know you have some projects. I mean, we've mentioned a couple. Um, but for listeners who want to hear your stuff, they kind of want to start, kind of getting to know you musically, where would you recommend they start listening? Or do you have any particular albums?
I mean, so there's this project called I Am an Instrument that um started as a concert basically. This guy called Jesper Limke and Morten McCoy, who is the piano player in I'm an Instrument and the Guiding Star Orchestra. Um, they'd been invited to play at this venue in Copenhagen, and they had this concept of, okay, let's just invite these musicians and have them improvise on stage, and we'll call it I'm an Instrument. And so that was the first recording that I've captured uh, for I Am an Instrument. Was actually the second concert that we played, but um, that one's called Volume One, and that has been an album that kind of got into this crazy algorithm, and it's been uh, a lot of people have checked it out now, which I'm really excited about because it was, it's literally the first 24 minutes of the constellation of musicians playing together. So what you're hearing on that record is us kind of like listening and like trying to get to know each other really, really quickly. Like, I mean, some of the musicians had played together, but as a whole group, that was the first time that we ever played together. So I think if you wanted to kind of get to know instinctually where a portion of this group of musicians, a part of this whole scene that we're working in, work together, that's kind of a neat moment that you could kind of listen to. It's like us getting to know each other musically and in a brief moment in time. Um, but that definitely informed the Mighty Tiny and the Mini Few project, and like a lot of those musicians that played in that band also play on the Mighty Tiny and the Mini Few album as well. So yeah, I would say I Am an Instrument is a good spot to relate to the two projects together, and and then also Guiding Star Orchestra. We've been working together for a long time now, and that's been a fun project. It's like a lot of people, 10 people, so it can be challenging at times to get anything done because there's so many so many voices and so many opinions and everything like that. But it is a beautiful thing. It's like it's this uh slowly moving no, it's not a machine. It's a organism, and it just happens. And like I've had to kind of just be like, okay, I am just gonna let this see what happens, because I can't, there's no one person that can do anything except for just let it be. And that's also a very interesting project, if you want to check out. That's very like, it's roots, like instrumental roots reggae with a kind of 70, like with a huge nod to like early 70s Jamaican productions, like, because we record down here and it's analog. Most of it's like the first record was completely analog, like straight to tape. And then we've done some, we usually record it to tape now and then do some, yeah, some of it is on Pro Tools, but most, like, it's the majority is definitely analog. So that's also a fun element too, because it's, the mix is what it is, because we just mix it in that moment and that's the way it sounds.
Yeah, you can't go back and just re-record. It's a
Yeah,
little more
exactly.
complicated than that.
Yeah.
So, well, Steve, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show
For
and
sure.
getting
Thanks
to
for
know
having me.
you. And I just want to say thank you. And yeah, be sure to go check out some of those projects, see what Steve's making some really cool stuff. And
Cool. Thanks, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate your time.
No problem.